Welcome back to the Sports Stove Podcast. Hope you enjoyed the interview with John Kuhn. And now I'm joined again by my dad, Dale Stovers, back with us. And Dad, we're going to be talking some baseball today. Spring training started beginning of the month, and we're getting closer and closer. Well, beginning of February, I guess, and we're getting closer and closer to the regular season. And so we're going to do a baseball preview, and today we're starting with the American League East. But first, Dad, how you doing?
Doing good, good.
Are you excited for baseball season this year?
Well, we will see. I keep up baseball. I enjoy fantasy baseball. You got me into that, so that kind of keeps me interested in it. Like I said, baseball's been really kind of strange for me ever since the strike years and years ago. But then it gets your interest back. They're trying to get more young players in it, and we'll see. Of course, with COVID, it looks like things are relaxing some potentially. So to be interested to see how baseball reacts to that. They could be a real test market for a lot of people in the stadium and see how that goes. But I don't know what their plans are. So
Yeah, baseball has not been known for leading the way
no,
in a lot of things.
no,
They really blew an opportunity last year. They could have done stuff, played games earlier on than they did, and they chose to kind of wait it out and ended up kind of getting left in the dust on that one. Opening day is April the 1st. We're plan to play 162 games this season,
Mhm.
and we'll see how all that shakes out. I mean, we've been doing fantasy baseball now for good night. It's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
Yeah, as a kid, you watched baseball, and so I did too, of course. And then, yeah, once the strike hit, we kind of didn't watch baseball for a long time. And then about the McGuire Sosa stuff, when it started kicking back up, was about the time we got back into it.
Yeah. No, that was true. And like I said, I grew up listening to I had an uncle that lived with us that listened to ball games on the radio every night, the Cardinal games. And so I grew up a lot with baseball cards and all that. Of course, then, we lived at the camp for many, many years, and I was kind of busy in the summer. And so baseball, I kind of didn't keep up with until the fantasy league came back into it. So, but yeah, like I said, there's some good players out there. And to me, baseball again, it's always switch teams as much as anything. With free agency, and that makes it tough for me because I remember. You think of a team, you think of a player, and he was there his whole career. But Mr. Met, Mr. Reds guy, but now you don't have any of that. So that makes it different. But there's some exciting games for sure.
The Cardinals thing is interesting because I was in Indiana for 3 years and everybody really liked the Cardinals. And so, what was the deal? Some of our listeners already know this, but back in the day, didn't I guess St. Louis had a radio station that reached like pretty much the whole Midwest region?
Yeah, KMOX was one of the biggest AM stations. It's one that at night you could pick it up just about anywhere. There were about three stations around. I think one in New Orleans, one in Boston, and one and KMOX. And again, I only lived a couple hours from St. Louis, but no, it was big. Jack Buck was the guy there a lot, and yeah, so I think St. Louis, the Cardinals are real well known because again, you could pick their games up. That changed when Turner started his network and the Braves were on TV all the time. And then that kind of changed the baseball on the radio thing.
Yeah, and what WGN would have the Chicago games on there on TV as well, and then
Yeah.
next thing you know, New York had their own station and kind of went from there. But all right, well, let's get right into it. We're previewing each episode here over the next several episodes. We're going to be previewing a division in baseball and getting our thoughts on here. So, Dad, we're going to do the AL East today. We're going to kind of go team by team, and I've got some stuff here. I've got their key losses, key additions. I have written down their projected lineups and their rotation. We might not go through all those specifically. We'll talk about some fantasy guys on each team, and then we'll talk win totals as well. I don't know if you did any looking at that,
I
but
did.
okay. So I've got the numbers here, and we'll talk about that as well. So let's go in alphabetical order. We're starting with the Baltimore Orioles. Key losses: they lost first baseman Renato Nunez, shortstop Jose Iglesias, and starting pitcher Alex Cobb. Only key addition that they have, and I don't know if you'd call it a key addition or not, but Freddie Galvis at shortstop. There, he's penciled in as the starting shortstop here for Baltimore this year. I'll go ahead and do their projected lineup. They got Austin Hayes, DJ Stewart, Anthony Santander, Trey Mancini, Chance Cisco, or Pedro Severino at catcher, Ryan Mountcastle, Freddie Galvis, Rio Ruiz, and Yomer Sanchez. Their lineup, their starting pitchers, the rotation is John Means, Keegan Aiken, Dean Kremer, Jorge Lopez, and Bruce Zimmerman. All right, Dad, Baltimore Orioles. At one point in life, they were decent, but they have not been good for a while now. What are your thoughts on Baltimore coming into the season?
Well, everything you read is that they'll be near the bottom. I mean, they're definitely, I guess, rebuilding. I don't know how their farm system is. I do know, in recent years, when you get a team that's on the bottom, if a couple of their farm players come up and do well, depending on the rest of their division, they can kind of surprise people and make a move. I don't know that Baltimore's ready to do that. I mean, everything says that they'll be down near the bottom.
Yeah, they've got some young talent, it appears, but I mean, in Major League Baseball, typically young talent isn't what does the trick. So you're talking more about the rebuild. Baseball is so weird about how they do that. I mean, it seems like the team gets a really good player, and you would think you'd build around that really good player, but a lot of times they just trade them off for somebody else and they rebuild. But that worked for the Astros. It worked somewhat for Tampa, but outside of that, it hasn't been great. I'm looking right now to see farm systems. I'm trying to find Baltimore on here. They are, come on, where are they? Number 7 farm system. So their farm system's pretty decent. According to this is from prospect1500.com. It says they have one of the most improved systems in the game. Top level talent is potentially game changing. The depth should only continue to improve as they finally dive into the international market. That's according to Ryan James from prospect1500.com. Let's talk what really people care about the most. Unless you're a Baltimore fan, all you care about is fantasy baseball. So what are some names you found to keep an eye on in Baltimore?
The guy I kind of like is this Ryan Mountcastle. He came on last year. He's real young, but he's quite a hitter. Could develop, in recent years. A guy comes up, you don't know when he ends up good last year, how will he pick up on that this year? But from a fantasy standpoint, he's a multi-position guy, and he's a name that's kind of stuck out to me. I think I had him at the end of the year last year, and as I've read, it sounds like he's a guy there. Santander, the outfielder, I think he has some potential. From there, of course, Mancini is your biggest name on there. And so, it'll be interesting. Sometimes you get a team, the team's not that good, but you can get a fantasy guy that really can do well, but it helps if he has a team around him most of the time, especially on the pitcher end of it. I don't know if they have any pitchers that stand out, from there.
Yeah, like you said, Mancini's the main name that I had Santander for most of the year last year in our fantasy league, and he did a lot of good stuff for me. I think when you're looking at a team like Baltimore, you're talking about fantasy value, you want to get guys in the top half of the lineup. Those guys in the bottom half aren't going to give you a ton of value just because they're not going to bat a whole lot on a bad team. Santander's a guy I've got my eye on, not as an early round pick, obviously, later in the draft. Then two of the pitchers, they got a lot of young pitching in Baltimore, but John Means and Keegan Aiken both seem to be guys to keep an eye on as value picks later in fantasy drafts in the pitching world as well. And it kind of depends on what this is hard for us because we're in the same fantasy league. And then I don't know. I think we have a couple guys that listen to the podcast that are in our fantasy league too. So I know we don't want to give away secrets before our draft at the end of the month. But when you talk about pitching, it matters what you value. I mean, if you value strikeouts, if you value wins, if you value ERA, those are the kind of things that you got to look at for each individual player. Because what one person says, hey, this guy's a great fantasy pick. If it's not what you value, it doesn't matter anyhow. But Means and Aiken, both young pitchers. And if you're in like a dynasty league, and even if you're in a deep keeper league, it might be worth looking at as potential for down the road, especially if Baltimore is going to continue to improve because of their depth. Let's see here. The over-under win total for Baltimore is set at 63.5 games. So 162 game season. Their over-under win total 63.5 games. I've never paid a whole lot of attention to standings because most of my baseball fandom has come as fantasy. And I just keep track of my team, and that's about it, where they are in the standings, because I don't care what their win total is. I just care if they're where they're at in the division. But 63.5 games is not a whole lot of games to win, I guess. What is that, a third? Not even of the season?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do you think about that number, 63.5? Do you think Baltimore is a team that's going to win 64 games, or are they going to be under that mark?
I would say they'd be right around that mark. I mean, that's what it looks like. Again, I think in baseball, again, that you do play division teams a little more, and so they're going to be in a stronger division from there. So I mean, everybody says it's in the 60 realm, and that's what it looks like. Looks like you get excited if a team's up in the 80s or over 85, and Baltimore's not there, so.
Yeah. And I think they could be a surprise team. I think they could be a decent team. Last year, I thought the Angels were going to be that team. I blame it on COVID. COVID did everything, but they were not the team I thought they were going to be. Baltimore now with this young core, they got some hitters, they got some decent pitchers, but they are in a tough division as we look at the rest of the division here in just a second. 63.5 is obviously a fair number, and I think I might even lean slightly over on that. Still in the 60s, maybe the 65, 66 range or something with that. All right, let's move on to the next one. The next one is the Boston Red Sox. Key losses for them, two outfielders, Andrew Benintendi and Jackie Bradley Jr. We'll talk more about Bradley when we get to the NL Central. But key additions, they brought in outfielder Hunter Renfroe, second baseman Kiki Hernandez, and starting pitcher Garrett Richards. All guys that are slated in to be starters and key contributors for the team. Their projected lineup is Alex Verdugo, Xander Bogaerts, Rafael Devers, JD Martinez, Christian Vasquez, Francho Cordero, Hunter Renfroe, Bobby Dahlbeck, and Kiki Hernandez. The starting five rotation is Nathan Eovaldi, Eduardo Rodriguez, Garrett Richards, Martin Perez, Nick Pivetta. That's until Chris Sale gets back in late April. Right now is when they're planning on Chris Sale being back into the rotation. So let's start with the Boston Red Sox. What are you seeing with them? What are your thoughts on them coming into the season?
Well, again, as I read that a little bit about them, people say they're kind of up and down, not a lot of stability there. Of course, they brought back their manager, and again, they're in. I've always kind of liked the Red Sox. They've obviously got some good players when it comes to fantasy. You have some guys there that always do well, but again, they're going to be in a division. Most everybody's got them slated fourth in the division. I don't know if they'll rise above that or not.
I can't say I ever knew that you liked the Red Sox at all. Where did that come from?
Again, way back in the day, I remember one of the first World Series. I remember I was not a Cardinal fan. Everybody would like the Cardinals back home. And in '67, the Red Sox were in the World Series with them. The Cardinals didn't win that one, but I kind of started to know a little bit about them and just know a few players from there. And again, like I said, I haven't kept up with baseball a lot, so I wouldn't say I'm a Red Sox fan, but it's not one of those teams I see and say, oh boy, I don't like them at all. So
yeah, it's not the Yankees. So
yeah.
well, we should probably say this for our listeners, not just so they know kind of who is the main baseball team you cheer for.
The Giants, San
Yeah.
Francisco Giants. My first sports hero was Willie Mays. I still think he was the best baseball player all around that's ever played. And of course, I remember McCovey and those guys. And so I just kind of stuck with them. And of course, not too many years ago, they won a couple World Series, so that was kind of exciting. But they had a really good manager then, which I think was probably the difference on that. And yeah, the Giants would be who I cheer for. And like you said, when I look at standings, I'd look to see where they're at. How far behind the Dodgers are they, and we go from there. So,
and I cheer for the Brewers. That was a late in life decision by me. That was a large part in due to that they were the AAA team in Nashville was the affiliate for the Brewers about the time I was looking to get back into baseball. So, anyways, so that's good for people to know kind of where our allegiances lie. But both of us are really more just sport fans nowadays, with the exception of football, just kind of enjoying certain players or different things like that. Boston, they have the number 19th ranked farm system, and they've got the 4th overall pick in the upcoming draft as well. So they have potential to get a pretty top talent there in the system. The pitching is interesting. Well, I'll let you talk first on the fantasy stuff for Boston.
to me, the guy that jumps out is Devers. He's come along since he was, came along kind of as a rookie or as a young player. Looks like he's probably the strongest of the bunch. Bogarts, is good. He has some flexibility as far as positions is concerned. Did a little bit of reading, and it looks like their catcher has some potential. Was rated kind of high. Martinez, of course, is the DH, and a guy that they seemed high on. And again, you and I in fantasy leagues never jump real quick on relief pitchers and closers, but apparently they've got a pretty good one there in Barnes.
Yeah, I go for the most part. I go with the philosophy of save the closers for the end of the draft, and then just kind of move throughout the season, changing whoever's the hot hand. Unless the Brewers have a hot hand like Hader, Knievel back in the day as well. But yeah, I typically stay away from closers as long as possible. Yeah, Martinez, Bogarts are the stays. Devers, I got burned by him one year. I don't go back to that well, so I'm done with him. Same with Vasquez. Last year, I got burned on Vasquez, but let's see here. Then there's a lot of people high on Alex Verdugo, the center fielder for Boston. He's slated right now, predicted to be the leadoff batter. That's a good spot. Anytime you get a leadoff hitter, typically you can at least find some value somewhere in there. And then also, I'm a fan of Eduardo Rodriguez. He's number 2 on the pitching list right now behind Evaldi. But again, it depends on what you value at pitcher in fantasy baseball. But I've always found Rodriguez to be a guy, I wouldn't draft him, but he's a guy I keep my eye on and pick up if I have someone get hurt or something like that. And he gets a lot of strikeouts, or at least he has for me. The over-under for Boston this year is slated at 79.5, so right below that 80 win mark. I look at this lineup. They got some guys there in Bogarts, Devers, Martinez, Renfroe even to some degree. That lineup doesn't scare anybody, though, I don't think. Pitching is okay. Garrett Richards' addition should be helped when Chris Sale, if he comes back healthy, obviously that's a big deal for Boston there as well. But, hovering at that 80 win mark, I think I'd probably go under on that one, below that 79.5 point win.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that'll be hard to get to 79.
Yeah, and I think if Baltimore improves at all, that's going to affect Boston as well. That's win totals. All right, the New York Yankees. Key losses. They lost 2 starting pitchers in J.A. Happ and James Paxton. They bring in some guys that I'm not sure how much they're going to actually be playing. Let's say like Jay Bruce, for instance, Derek Dietrich. Both right now fighting for spots on the roster. Dietrich actually is one that probably should stick. I don't know if he will or not. But they brought in some pitchers. They lost 2, but they brought in Corey Kluber and Jameson Taillon from Pittsburgh as well. Their projected lineup goes DJ LeMahieu, Aaron Judge, Aaron Hicks, Giancarlo Stanton, Luke Voigt, Gleyber Torres, Clint Frazier, Gio Urshela, and Gary Sanchez. That's a pretty stacked lineup
Yeah.
right there. The pitching is stacked as well. Garrett Cole, Corey Kluber, Jamison Talion, Jordan Montgomery, Domingo German, or Yerman, I forget how they say his name. And then Luis Severino should be back come around June or July as well into that pitching rotation. So the ever hated Yankees, I hate the Yankees. I'm assuming you do. I don't know if I've ever asked you that or not. But what are your thoughts on the Yankees?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily a Yankee fan, not a team that I can say I despise. I've got some good friends that are big Yankee fans and go, so that always makes me a little more partial, I guess. But yeah, everything you read, they're stacked. They're definitely the team in this division, maybe one of the teams in baseball. Yankees, of course, have a history for going out and getting players. Of course, they've had some young guys develop, in the last couple of years, which wasn't always the case there. So, Torres, I believe, would be that way, and several of them, of course, Aaron Judge. So they definitely be the team to beat in that division, and depending on staying healthy. And, of course, again, how COVID affects everything. But ideally, with that lineup playing every day, they're going to be pretty hard to beat.
Yeah, and their farm system, according to Paul Wooden, they have some pitchers in the farm system right now coming up. But you're talking about Garrett Cole, who's one of the best pitchers in the league. Corey Kluber, who's had some really good seasons. Jamison Taylor, which has had some solid seasons in Pittsburgh. There's some talent there. The batting lineup is incredible as well. Young talent, everything like that. They're over under win totals at 97, which is 11 above any other team in the division. When you're getting close to that 100 win mark, that's projected, of course, just the over under mark. But I don't think hitting 97 wins is going to be that difficult, pending health and all that stuff. Obviously, Garrett Cole goes down, that's going to affect the win total for New York, obviously, as well. What about fantasy wise?
Well, obviously, the names that we've mentioned are all, big names there. Sanchez, of course, been good at catching. As far as a catcher, which isn't always a main position in fantasy, but if you can get a really strong one, that's good. And I know he's done well for teams in our league there. And of course, Judge, and of course, we have a keeper league, so he's not going to be available anywhere. But Torres, of course, is good. They have a lot of names that jump out, and like you said, they have a good team, and so even people later in the lineup, have a chance to have some good stats. So getting a Yankee or two, probably from a fantasy standpoint, is something most people look at.
Yeah, the big thing has been health when it comes to Judge and Stanton the last couple seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And Stanton had one really down season, but when healthy last year, he looked decent again. Gleyber Torres. Do you have Torres in our league?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I don't.
And then you've got LeMahieu as well, who's one of the top second basemen. Luke Voigt, he tends to stick around in our league for a while. He's usually there to pick up if you want him during the season. People kind of pick him up and drop him as injuries happen, and he kind of floats around. But he can provide some power numbers for you as well. Obviously, Garrett Cole is top pitcher. Kluber, Talon, there's definitely some value there in those guys. They've got some relief pitchers too. I just don't like to talk about relief pitchers at all. Let's go on to Tampa. Tampa Bay is, let's see, your key losses. They lose Hunter Renfroe and then two starting pitchers, Charlie Morton and Blake Snell in the offseason. Key additions, they bring in three pitchers in the offseason. Rich Hill, Chris Archer returns, and Michael Wacha from St. Louis also there. Their projected lineup is Austin Meadows, Brandon Lowe, Randy Arozarena, Ji-Man Choi, Manuel Margot, Joe Wendell, Willie Adams, Kevin Kiermaier, and Mike Zunino. The pitching rotation is Tyler Glasnow, Rich Hill, Chris Archer, Ryan Yarbrough, and Michael Walker as well. What are your thoughts on Tampa? They were kind of the down and out team not too long ago, but they keep sticking around, it seems like, each season.
Yeah, they really did. They were surprised last year. It looks like, again, people are kind of high on them. On the other hand, they could drop. It looks like they lost more than they gained on the pitchers, and that may hurt them there because I think that probably was a real help to them. On that, again, not a lot of big names there. But I don't know if they had a lot of big names last year when it started, and they made a good run at it. So I think they're kind of up in the air. Obviously, I think the fact that they did so well last year makes you think, well, don't know where they'll be this year.
Yeah, Chris Archer, if he was back to what he was when he was in Tampa the first time, well, he was a great pitcher back then. Now, he's just not the same guy he was back then. They got Ryan Yarborough's pretty decent. Michael Walker's had some okay seasons. Rich Hill doesn't excite me. Glasnow is good. But their over under win total is at 86, which is second place in the division, tied with Toronto, who we're looking at next. But yeah, you look at this team, and there's nobody that's superstar on this team for sure. But last year, a lot to do with their management. Their manager did a great job of being kind of in the front of things, and how he does the lineups and how he does the pitching staff and that kind of stuff. Plays around with it a little bit. I'll let you go first on the fantasy stuff with Tampa. Any players that stand out to you?
People seem to be high on this outfielder, Rosarina.
Mm-hmm.
He would have real potential there. Of course, Lowe on the infield. Meadows is a guy that bounces around, but sometimes, can be a help depending on the main guy you can count on. Their pitchers, again, they're supposed to have a good relief pitcher in Anderson. And of course, you got Glasnow as the starting pitcher. Probably as their ace coming into it. So again, not a lot of big names that I could see on that. Things that jumped out at you. Probably be a team that you take a chance on somebody and just keep an eye on them early, and they're going to have somebody that's going to have a good year, a couple players.
Yeah, to me, Tampa is the value team as far as drafting guys in fantasy. None of these guys are you going to want to take in the first few rounds, but as the draft goes on, there's some guys to definitely watch. Rosarina, he had a great season last season, came on late, was kind of a highlight reel there late. So it'll be interesting to see how that carries over to a full season. Brandon Lowe is a guy that I probably stay away from, but he has some fantasy value. Austin Meadows, I've had on my team multiple times, and he's kind of a guy that I'll take later in a draft or something like that because he provides some decent numbers. First baseman Ji-Man Choi, he's great as far as a social media follow, as far as entertaining. He was in Milwaukee for a little while and ended up going down to Tampa. He's a power hitter. If he gets going, he can give you about 2 months solid stretch of home runs. Outside of that, he's not great to have on the fantasy team. But if a guy gets injured and you need a first baseman with some power, he's a guy there for you. Tampa Bay, according to prospects1500.com, is rated as the number one farm system. According to Jake Weiner, he says, led by a consensus top prospect in baseball, the Rays farm system boasts a bevy of elite hitting and pitching talent. A harmonious blend of international scouting, consistent drafting, and high-end player development has continuously allowed the farm to produce players ready to contribute at the next level. So they've got guys coming up in the next year or two as well that could make kind of like Baltimore. You might in 2 years, Baltimore and Tampa might be the teams to watch, depending on what happens with them. Let's move to Toronto. I don't have any key losses for them. They kept most of their roster intact. They did add outfielder George Springer and closer Kirby Yates. I'll throw him in there, even though I don't like to talk about relief pitchers, but he's a big addition for them. Mm-hmm. Their projected lineup is George Springer, Marcus Semien, Bo Bichette, Teoscar Hernandez, Vlad Guerrero, Kevin Biggio, Lourdes Gurriel, Rowdy Tellez, or Randy Grichuk at the DH position, and then catcher Danny Jensen. Pitching staff is, I never remember how to say this guy's name, Hyun-Jin Ryu. I don't think that's right. But anyways, Robbie Ray, Nate Pearson, Tanner Roark, and Steven Matz. When I think of Toronto, the only highlight I think of Toronto was their World Series back in the day. Outside of that, I never think of great baseball in Toronto. I know that's probably bad, but what are your thoughts on the Blue Jays?
Well, again, I think the report on them is they have lots of potential. I think it's kind of the opposite of Tampa, where there wasn't any names that jumped out. There's a lot more big names in Toronto, especially when you look at the fantasy part of it. People that are more familiar or has a lot of potential to help there. Again, they seem pretty solid. Again, they didn't have any losses. So again, is it better to make a lot of moves and try to improve your team, or if you got a pretty solid team, stay with it? And they've kind of stayed with it. So to be interesting from there. But they have some names, and Springer, obviously could be a help to them to add to a pretty strong lineup already.
Yeah, they are incredibly young, and with guys like Bichette and Guerrero, Biggio being the main guys, Hernandez in there, of course, as well. That brings up a pretty solid place. They're listed as number 4 farm system, and pretty much all their main farm guys are currently on the team. They've got 2 prospects, Austin Martin and Jordan Groshans, that'll be up in the next year or two as well. But this team, they've got their over-under win total at 86, just like Tampa, so second place in the division. I think Toronto is probably going to have as high as expectations of a second-tier team as anybody in Major League Baseball coming into this year, because they have the young, exciting talent. Everybody knows Vlad Guerrero. Like, everybody's eyes are on him when he comes up to bat. But Bichette has been really good, and Biggio has been all right. Hernandez has been really good in the outfield, and they've got some pitching to go with it now as well. What about fantasy value here with Toronto?
Well, obviously, you got the big names that you mentioned there with Guerrero and Bichette. I kind of jumped on Biggio early and have stayed with him. It seems like he has a lot of potential. Again, he's a multi-position guy, and I always like to have a few of those. That seems to help at different times. So I think he's a good one from that standpoint. Hernandez are pretty high on in the outfield. Has potential there, and they're pretty solid on the infield. And like you said, we don't talk a lot about closers, but looked like Kirby Yates was a real good addition there. And if you get a team that's good, then your closer can really help you. So.
Yeah, and I don't know why I'm telling you my secrets, but Nate Pearson, he's the number 3 in the rotation right now, and Toronto is a guy to watch as well. Late round value with Nate Pearson as a pitcher. He's a guy to keep an eye on. Robbie Ray, I'm not a huge Robbie Ray fan as far as fantasy value goes, but Pearson right behind him in the rotation is kind of going to take that next step forward, I think. This year would be a guy to watch moving forward. Other than that, the main guys, Guerrero, Bichette, you've had Biggio. I'm not a huge Biggio guy either when it comes to fantasy. And then George Springer's an interesting one. Last year, the Houston Astros, the guys that were cheating, they kind of took a pretty big dip on numbers last year without the help of the buzzer and the trash cans and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to watch those guys to see if they rebound. Guys like George Springer, Altuve, those kind of guys, to see what kind of comeback they do. Getting out of Houston might be good for Springer, and we'll definitely see where all that goes with him. I believe I have him. I got to look at that. I don't remember if I do. I think I have him, but I don't remember if I do or not. I tried to make a trade for him last year, but anyways, so they've got the Yankees with the most wins on the win totals at 97, then Tampa and Toronto at 86, Boston at 79.5, and Baltimore at 63.5. I think Baltimore goes over, Boston goes under. The Knicks, I said it again. The Yankees, I'm not sure, at 97, that's a high number, and then Tampa and Toronto right there around that 86 value. So next episode, I should say, we're looking at the AL Central, and we'll be going through that. Have you started working on that yet, Dan?
No, I haven't. I've thought about it a little bit, but I haven't. Getting ready to. So.
Well, I'm trying to decide if I want to go to the Central or if I want to go to the NL East next. We'll stick with the American League. We'll go to the American League Central. We'll go
Okay.
ahead and go through the American Leagues, and then we'll go through there. So that's coming. Me and Dad will work out a time to get that recorded, but that'll be coming as the next episode there. And then we might have, I haven't decided, we'll see how the interview goes. I'm interviewing a UFC fighter, Eric Anders, for this weekend's MMA show, Belly Up MMA show. And if that interview is could be fun to listen to, I might throw that in on the next episode as well, so people can hear that there. But we've started talking baseball, which means the sun has to be out. It is out today. The sun's out. It's starting to get that good feeling for sure. And I'll be interested to see what goes on this season, especially with these teams here. So, Dad, thank you for your input. I want to get more fantasy secrets next time. You didn't give away too much this time, so we'll get that going next time as well. Once we're all done with the MLB preview for division by division, we're going to do one final Major League Baseball recap, and we'll kind of talk about just the league in general on that episode. But for now, we'll end the episode here with the AL East, and we'll get into the AL Central in the next episode also. So thank you so much for tuning in today. Make sure you visit the links that are at the podcast notes for Blue Coolers and Skull Candy. And until next time, we'll see you around the sports stove.